of Japanese Americans in the fight for reparations, as reported by The Guardian. This is Part 2. I'm Tyrone Bowman. This is Tyrone Bowman Tonight. Now they're at the point where they took the fight to Washington. Now the truth was finally out in the open. But winning reparations also meant fighting in the courts and in Congress. On one front, a team of lawyers set out to topple the legal justification for the concentration camp. They reopened the case of Fred Korematsu. My apologies, who in 1942, when the roundup of people of Japanese descent began, defied military orders and went into hiding, eventually getting arrested and tried. His case went to the Supreme Court, which upheld the constitutionality of the wartime incarceration of Japanese Americans. Check it out. I'll tell you what's on the picture in a moment. That's the photo taken. The year is not there, during the time when a press conference was held concerning Fred Korematsu. He is there with his team of lawyers. But 4 decades later, lawyers found documents that proved the government had lied and suppressed evidence about the supposed military threat posed by Japanese Americans. Korematsu's conviction was overturned in 1983, undercutting one of the main objections to redress, that wartime incarceration had been unconstitutional. That was the last piece of the argument against reparations. It boosted the movement, said Don Tamaki, one of the lawyers on the case who recently served on California's Reparations Task Force as the panel's only non-black member. His own parents had been incarcerated in Topaz, Utah. We were on a mission, Tamaki said, of the Korematsu case. We were out to vindicate our families. On another front, a federal commission studying incarcerations concluded in 1983 that it was the result of race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. Furthermore, boosting the case for reparations, Norman Mineta, a Japanese American congressman from San Jose, who was incarcerated as a child, co-sponsored a new redress bill in Congress, and hundreds of Japanese Americans flocked to Washington, D.C. to advocate for it. So, here is a photo of Tamaki, who recently served on California's Reparations Task Force as the panel's only non-black member. So, here it is right here. I don't know how clear it is, but I'm doing my best. There was urgency to pass it. The community wanted to ensure that elderly survivors received compensation before they died. Ochi, who flew to Washington to support the bill, remembers walking on Capitol Hill, handing out press packets and lobbying members of Congress. Most mainstream news organizations weren't covering the movement, so she called Japanese American newspapers on the phone to give them the day-by-day account. Just before the House voted on the bill, listen, a delegation of 141 Japanese Americans arrived in Washington. Maya Awataki, an organizer with NCRR, remembers, we had gardeners, truck drivers, doctors, attorneys, college students, professors, veterans, little kids, moms, EC first-generation immigrants to the U.S., she said. The movement was also multiracial. One key legislative ally was Mervyn Domley, a black congressman from Los Angeles. Atawaki said she had met him years before when she went to a town hall in his district. She pressed him on redress, and he admitted he wasn't familiar with the movement, but asked her to tell him more. Later, he hired Awataki as his press secretary. Damali, who introduced a different redress bill in 1982, had helped facilitate early lobbying delegations to Washington. Adewaki said introducing activists to other congressmen, making appointments, letting them use his office as a headquarters, and even arranging for them to stay at the homes of legislative staff. Damali was chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, or the CBC, was among the first to sign on to any reparation bills. Adewaki said with Black California, congresspeople, including Ron Dellums, also playing a crucial role. Finally, 7 years after the first commission hearings, and 46 years after incarceration began, Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which offered an official apology for these fundamental violations of the basic civil liberties and constitutional rights, and set up a small fund to pay for public education efforts about this history in $20,000 redress checks to living survivors. Think about that for a moment. 300 plus years of slavery, mutilation, rape, butchering, destruction of families, culture, language. No apology, no reparations. They say it's out of the question. This is why black people are angry. The question was asked when Trump ran in 2016 regarding white rage. They kept saying, well, they're angry, they're angry, they're angry. Finally, someone said, well, why are these white men so angry? They were angry because a black man sat upon the throne of America. And they think that we as a people are just supposed to become submissive and passive and docile. My ancestors and their lives matter. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Just like the ancestry of other ethnic groups matter, the ancestry and historical compilation in its total perspective of genealogies matters to me. A lot of times people look at the iconic photo of President Reagan signing the Civil Liberties Act, surrounded by beaming legislators, and think that's representative of the redress and reparations movement. Adewaki said, but it's not. It was a movement and a victory for and by the people. Here's Mr. Reagan, proudly. Ronald Reagan, former actor, who became president. It was a major victory, but the work to educate and advocate never stopped. These days, Adewaki spends her time organizing and traveling the country, attending reparations conferences, trying to learn as much as she can about the movement for black reparations, and convince other Japanese Americans that they should support it too. Japanese Americans have had a long history of interracial solidarity on social justice issues, and from protesting the war in Vietnam to supporting the anti-apartheid movement to fighting Islamophobia after 9/11 and Donald Trump's Muslim travel ban and family separation policy for migrant families. There's a recognition among Asian Americans that if it wasn't for the civil rights movement, where would we be, said Tamaki, explaining that the legislation that came out of the movement opened doors for Asian Americans too. We'd probably be where we were after the roundup. After the introduction of AB 3121, the California bill to create a task force to study reparations for black residents, the veteran NCRR activist Kathy Masuka helped organize Japanese Americans to call state legislators asking them to vote for the bill. NCRR and the group Nikki Progressive also set up a joint committee to start studying African Americans' reparations demands, as well as the Japanese American community's own history of redress. Many activists and Japanese American community groups have also been involved at a national level, testifying and writing letters in support of H.R. 40, the federal bill to establish a commission to study reparations for African Americans. To be continued. I'm Tyrone Bowman. Never surrender, never quit.